On my 29th birthday, my parents raised a glass to my sister and said she was the only one worth celebrating. I smiled, swallowed the burn, and cut the cake with steady hands. By dawn, the PR empire she built on lies, and the company that enabled it, would be on fire. I wasn't born ruthless. They trained me. My name is Ava Ridley, and the lie began with the lighting. In private room 14 of the Gilded Perch, the light was the color of old money and warm honey, engineered to make everyone look softer, kinder, richer. It dripped from a brass chandelier onto the starched white linen, making the heavy silverware gleam like sanitized artifacts. The air, thick with the scent of seared scallops and expensive perfume, was a cushion against the clinking of glasses and the discreet scrape of forks on porcelain. It was a perfect scene, curated for an audience that wasn't there. I sat wedged between my parents, a human buffer zone they had designed without asking. My father, with his crisp suit and a smile that never quite reached his eyes, was angled entirely toward my sister. Celine, my mother, her pearls a luminous cage around her throat, mirrored him, creating a closed circuit of adoration that excluded the space I occupied. Celine, of course, was in her element, soaking in the golden light as if it were a nutrient. She was the sun. The rest of us were merely planets caught in her gravitational pull, our own orbits dictated by her needs. The main course had been cleared away by silent, efficient staff, leaving a clean battlefield for the final act. My father stood, raising his champagne flute. The crystal caught the light, refracting it into 100 tiny, sharp daggers. "A toast," he announced, his voice resonating with the practiced warmth of a man who has closed many deals. "To our daughter." A knot tightened in my stomach. For a fleeting, foolish second, I thought he meant me. It was, after all, my 29th birthday. "To Celine," he continued, his eyes locked on her, "who continues to make this family proud, who shines so brightly in everything she does. With her big announcement tomorrow, she's really the one we should be celebrating tonight, the only one truly worth celebrating." My mother beamed, her glass rising to meet his. "To Celine." The words didn't just land, they detonated, a silent, concussive blast that sucked the air from my lungs. The burn of it was acidic, crawling up my throat. I watched them, a perfect triptych of familial devotion, and I felt nothing and everything all at once. The room tilted slightly, the golden light turning bilious. No one looked at me. No one mentioned my name. I had been erased from my own birthday. I composed my face into a mask of placid agreement. I raised my own glass, filled with still water, a detail they hadn't noticed, and touched it to theirs. The clink was a brittle, hollow sound, a lie made audible. Then came the gifts, a Tiffany bracelet from our aunt, a Chanel clutch from a family friend, all for Celine. Her corner of the table looked like a dragon's hoard of luxury goods. I waited until the flurry of tissue paper subsided before sliding my own small, velvet-wrapped box across the table. "Happy birthday, Ava," I said to myself in the quiet of my own mind, a bitter little joke. Celine picked it up, her perfectly manicured fingers undoing the ribbon with practiced ease. Inside was a sterling silver fountain pen, sleek and minimalist. I'd had her initials, S.R., engraved near the clip in a clean, simple font. "Oh," she said, her voice a polished chime. "That's cute. Ava?" "Cute." The word was a dismissal, a pat on the head. She held it for a moment, the way one might hold a curious seashell, before placing it down amidst the glittering pile of her real treasures. It was immediately swallowed by the logos and the leather, a sliver of substance lost in a sea of style, a perfect metaphor for us. Just then, her phone, lying face up beside her plate, vibrated against the tablecloth. The screen lit up, illuminating her face with a cool blue-white glow. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Colton Rusk. My CEO, the titan at the helm of Northwick Analytics, the place where I worked not as a public face, but as the head of the model governance team. the intellectual plumbing deep in the building's guts. Celine snatched the phone, her thumb dancing across the screen. A preview of the message was visible for a split second, long enough for my trained eyes to catch the key phrase, "Press release draft for morning." And just like that, the final gear clicked into place. The whispers, the closed-door meetings, Celine's recent obsession with corporate ethics, it all coalesced into a single, ugly picture. The press conference tomorrow wasn't just a new campaign, it was her ascension. Northwick was about to announce its Clean Ledger initiative, a massive PR push to secure Series E funding by positioning itself as the most transparent, ethical data firm on the market, and they had chosen my sister, the master of surfaces, the artisan of perception, to be its face, the moral compass. They were going to sell a lie, and my sister was the lead salesperson. A lie built on a foundation I managed, on data I was responsible for safeguarding. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. The glass was cool and solid in my hand. I glanced at the custom face on my smartwatch, discreetly swiping to a status monitor. Mirror SVR, runtime, 42D07H13M2s, log, capture, active, checksum, verified. 42 days. For 42 days, my private, encrypted mirror server had been running, silently duplicating every log, every email, every model adjustment, every keystroke that passed through the executive and data integrity channels at Northwick. 42 days of irrefutable, time-stamped, cryptographically signed evidence, enough to not just hang them, but to dismantle the gallows and salt the earth where it stood. My mother must have sensed a shift in my stillness. She leaned over, her voice a conspiratorial whisper, her breath smelling of champagne and disapproval. "Ava, please, don't ruin the atmosphere. Ruin it, as if the truth were a stain on their pristine white tablecloth, as if my silence was a service I owed them." I turned to her and gave her the brightest, emptiest smile I could muster. "Of course not. Mom," I said, my voice even and calm. "I'm not ruining the party. I'm just clearing the table." Her brow furrowed, confused by a metaphor she couldn't immediately parse. It was always the things she didn't understand that made her the most nervous. The cake arrived then, a confection of chocolate and raspberry that probably cost more than my first car. A waiter placed it in front of me, but the 29 candles seemed to lean toward Celine. Drawn to her heat, they sang, their voices a little too loud in the small room, a performance of joy that felt jarring and false. They sang for my birthday, but their eyes were on her triumph. "Make a wish," my father boomed. I closed my eyes, the heat of the tiny flames warming my face. I didn't wish for revenge. I didn't wish for an apology. I wished for something far more precise. I wished for the truth to arrive on time. I took a breath and blew. Every single candle went out in a single, smooth puff. A wisp of gray smoke curled into the air and vanished. As my father made a show of cutting the first slice and handing it to Celine, I slipped my phone from my clutch beneath the table. My thumb found the encrypted app I had built myself. It opened to a simple interface, a black screen with 3 pending directives, each labeled with a code name: Council, Press, Regulator. Beside them was a single, grayed-out button: Arm. My finger hovered over the screen, the sound of my father's laughter, of Celine's delighted gasp as she received her cake, of my mother's gentle applause. It all faded into a distant hum. This was the point of no return. The moment the leash, frayed from a lifetime of being yanked and tightened, finally snapped clean. I pressed the button. It glowed green for a second before fading back to black. It was done. 3 calendar invites, each containing a link to a separate, heavily encrypted data vault, were now irrevocably scheduled. At 7:30 a.m., an invitation would be delivered to the top investigative reporter at the Ledger Line. At 8:00 a.m., a summons would appear on the calendar of my whistleblower attorney, a specialist in the Dodd-Frank Act. And at 8:15 a.m., a formal complaint and preliminary evidence package would be routed to a contact I had cultivated for months within the Securities and Exchange Commission's Enforcement Division. I looked up from my phone as a slice of cake was placed in front of me. I picked up my fork. The silver felt cold and heavy, a weapon in its own right. I smiled at my family, a genuine smile this time. The party wasn't over, it was just getting started. The chocolate cake was a dense, cloying thing, its sweetness a suffocating blanket on my tongue. I ate it with the slow, methodical precision of a bomb disposal expert, each movement of the fork measured. Across the table, my family's performance continued. They were a tableau vivant of success, perfectly lit and framed by the expensive decor of the private room. They existed inside a hermetically sealed display case, one they had spent my entire life polishing. Inside, everything was perfect. From the outside, you could see the curated smiles, the casual gestures of affection, the gleaming surfaces. But I was on the inside, too. I knew where the hairline fractures were. I knew the internal pressure was building. They used to call us the Ridley Girls. It sounded like a brand, a wholesome 1950s singing duo, but it was just a label for a division of labor. Celine was the star. I was the backstage brain. She got the solos, the lead roles, the applause. I got the satisfaction of knowing the lighting cues were perfect and the sound system wouldn't fail. When Celine won Homecoming Queen, I was the one who wrote the witty, self-deprecating speech that charmed the entire school. She delivered it flawlessly. Of course, my father clapped the loudest, his face bursting with a pride so radiant it was almost blinding. He never asked who wrote the words. He assumed the light that illuminated Celine was generated by her alone, not reflected off a carefully positioned mirror named Ava. This dynamic was codified when it came to our education. I earned a full academic scholarship to study statistics and operational risk. It wasn't a gift. It was a contract. It came with a punishing work-study schedule. Late nights in the library fueled by cheap coffee, and the constant, gnawing pressure that a single failing grade would shatter my future. My parents spoke of it with a kind of detached approval, as if I had acquired a useful, if unglamorous, trade skill, like plumbing. Celine's education was a different matter entirely. She chose to major in media aesthetics, a field that seemed to consist primarily of understanding Instagram filters and a history of celebrity culture. When she decided she wanted to find herself during a semester in Florence, the money appeared instantly, drawn from the mythical family fund that was never available for my lab fees or textbook costs. My tuition was an expense to be mitigated. Hers was an investment in her brand. I remember standing in the kitchen one summer, trying to explain the elegance of a regression model I was building for a professor. My father listened for a moment, his head tilted, a look of polite confusion on his face. Then he clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture meant to be kind, but felt like a final verdict. "That's great, honey," he said, already turning away. "You've got a good head for that stuff." Later that evening, a neighbor asked what his girls were up to. I heard his voice from the living room, clear and definitive. "Ava's a natural with computers. Celine," he paused, his voice warming with affection. "Celine's a natural with crowds." He wasn't wrong. He was just describing the cage he had built for each of us. Mine was made of logic and data, a quiet, solitary space. Hers was made of adoration and public opinion, a vast, glittering arena. The problem was, he never realized I had learned how to pick the lock on my cage. While Celine had become so comfortable in hers, she couldn't tell where she ended and the bars began. The proof of this is mounted on the mantelpiece in their living room, the heart of the family display case. It's the official family portrait, taken 5 years ago. Celine is in the center, naturally, wearing a cream-colored dress that catches the light. She is laughing, a perfect, artless cascade of joy. My parents flank her, gazing at their masterpiece, and then there's me, on the edge of the frame. The photographer had told us to squeeze in tighter, and in the shuffle, I was pushed slightly to the side. The expensive antique silver frame my mother chose crops the image just so. My face is there, my smile is present, a practiced, neutral expression. but my left shoulder is completely gone. I am an addendum, an afterthought partially edited out for a more pleasing composition. No one ever noticed, or if they did, they agreed with the frame's decision. The only time I can remember receiving their undivided, unambiguous approval was when I was 17. The washing machine broke mid-cycle, flooding the laundry room. My father swore at it. My mother wrung her hands. A repairman couldn't come for 2 days, for 2 hours. I sat on the damp floor with the machine's technical manual and a set of tools. I diagnosed the problem, a failed drain pump, figured out how to bypass the faulty sensor to drain the drum, and found the replacement part online. For the next 2 days, my parents walked on eggshells around me, their usual stream of critiques and suggestions silenced. When the part arrived and I fixed the machine myself, a profound quiet settled over the house. That was my reward. Not a thank you, not a good job, Ava. Just silence. The absence of their disapproval was the closest I ever got to praise. My utility had been proven. The system was running smoothly again. I could return to the background. And I did. I was good at it. I got into Northwick Analytics on the strength of my thesis on predictive risk modeling. I worked my way up from a junior analyst to leading the entire model governance team through sheer, relentless competence. I was the one they called when an algorithm produced an anomaly, the one who could trace a single data point through petabytes of information. I was the company's foundation, buried deep underground where no one could see it. Celine, on the other hand, arrived at Northwick through a different door entirely, a VIP entrance. The company had hired a high-priced PR firm to handle their pre-funding image crisis, and Celine was the firm's rising star. She didn't need to understand the data. She just needed to know how to sell it. She was brought in on a wave of introductions and air kisses, her value determined not by what she knew, but by who she knew and how well she could smile for a camera. My family saw this as the natural order of things. Ava, the brain, had built a solid, if unspectacular, career. Celine, the star, was now ascending to her rightful place in the sky. They believed in my quietude. They mistook my silence for contentment, my composure for compliance. They built their entire world on the assumption that I would never, ever push back, that I would continue to play my part as the silent, supportive infrastructure for Celine's glittering facade. They were wrong. They failed to understand the first principle of structural engineering. Calm is not weakness. It is the prerequisite for stability. I have been calm my entire life. I have observed. I have analyzed. I have collected data. My composure wasn't a personality trait. It was a method. It was the quiet focus of a sniper, the steady hand of a surgeon. It was the stillness required to identify the precise point of maximum stress on a system. It is the fulcrum upon which the entire weight of a lever rests before it moves the world. I took the last bite of my cake. The sweetness was gone, leaving only a bitter aftertaste, like ash. I looked at them, my father laughing at something Celine said, my mother watching her with eyes full of reflected light. They were beautiful, perfect, frozen in their moment, but the glass of their display case, so clear and strong, had a flaw they could never see, because it was on the inside. It was me, and tonight, with the push of a single button, I had applied just enough pressure. The first crack was already spreading. They just couldn't hear the sound yet. Northwick Analytics occupies the 22nd through the 25th floors of the Riverline Tower, a monument of steel and smoked glass that pierces the Grey Bridge skyline. The building is an ecosystem of ambition. All polished concrete floors, recessed lighting, and keycard access doors that hiss open and shut with pneumatic finality. The air is filtered, temperature-controlled, and smells faintly of ozone and industrial-grade coffee. It's an arena designed for a specific kind of combat, bloodless, silent, and waged across spreadsheets and encrypted chat channels. This is my territory. My official title is Head of Model Governance. It's a deliberately opaque name for a brutally simple function. I am the keeper of the truth. My team of 6 doesn't create the algorithms that predict market volatility or assess credit risk for our fintech clients. We police them. We are the auditors, the librarians, and the executioners of the company's data soul. We control who gets access. We log every change, and we run constant audits to ensure the models are performing as designed, free from bias or unauthorized influence. My world is one of checksums, access logs, and immutable ledgers. In a company that sells predictions, I am the guardian of its memory. For the past 6 months, the company's memory has been under siege by its own leader, CEO Colton Rusk. Colton is a man sculpted from the pages of a business magazine. Sharp suit, sharper haircut, and a charismatic intensity that makes people want to believe. His vision, the one he was pitching to every venture capital firm on the Eastern Seaboard, was the Clean Ledger Initiative. It was a masterstroke of branding. In a post-Cambridge Analytica world, Northwick would be the paragon of transparency. We wouldn't just be accurate, we would be ethically unimpeachable. Our data would be pure, our models transparent, our processes an open book. It was the key to unlocking a massive Series E funding round that would elevate the company from a major player to an industry titan. And the face of this new corporate sainthood was my sister, Celine. She was technically a contractor from her PR agency, but her presence became ubiquitous. Her professionally photographed headshot was on every internal deck about the initiative. She glided through the glass-walled conference rooms, her voice a smooth, confident melody as she coached executives on authenticity and stakeholder engagement. She was selling a story about ethics to the world, armed with a killer smile and a teleprompter full of focus-grouped talking points. She was selling a product she had never bothered to understand, packaged in a language I knew to be a lie. The first red flag appeared not on a dashboard, but as a faint, discordant note in the rhythm of the system. I noticed a pattern. 48 hours before every major investor pitch, our primary risk assessment model would show a subtle but significant smoothing of its loss window projections. High-risk portfolios would suddenly appear marginally safer. Potential loss figures would dip by a few basis points. It wasn't overt fraud. It was more insidious. It was the digital equivalent of an Instagram filter, blurring away the blemishes to present a more attractive picture. To an outside auditor, it would look like statistical noise. To me, it looked like a thumb on the scale. This was why my mirror server existed. I had commissioned it under the guise of a redundant disaster recovery protocol, an easy sell in a risk-averse company, buried in a nondescript rack in a secondary data closet. It did its job silently. It didn't just back up the data, it created a perfect, byte-for-byte, second-by-second recording of the entire governance system. It logged every query, every command, every model parameter change, and crucially, every single email and internal message that passed between key personnel. It was my black box, my incorruptible witness. As the smoothing continued, I began to query its logs. The results were immediate and sickeningly clear. A trinity of names appeared, over and over, in the hours leading up to each data alteration. Colton Rusk, whose account authorized the executive-level overrides, Dana Varick, our CFO, whose credentials were used to execute the script that adjusted the raw data inputs, and Celine. She wasn't in the code, but she was in the communication. She was the ghost in the machine. Her emails, sent from her PR agency account to Colton and Dana, were masterpieces of plausible deniability. She never said, "change the numbers." She was far too clever for that. Instead, she offered linguistic suggestions for a more positive narrative alignment. One email, time-stamped at 2:05 a.m. before a pitch to the formidable Blackwood Group, was the final piece I needed. Colton had sent a draft of the risk report, showing a potential 12% quarterly loss in a key fintech sector. Celine's reply came minutes later. "This language is alarming. For the clean ledger narrative, perhaps we can frame this as navigating a dynamic risk environment with an 88% stability projection. It's not about changing the facts. It's about choosing the most constructive lens." An 88% stability projection, it was beautiful in its dishonesty. And an hour later, Dana's account ran a script named Constructive Lens, and the model's output was duly aligned. My mirror server captured it all: the email, the script execution, the change in the data, and the sanitized report being attached to an email for Blackwood. My first instinct was to trust the system I was paid to protect. I filed an anonymous report through the company's official whistleblower hotline, a supposedly confidential third-party service. I detailed the anomaly, provided the specific timestamps of the data smoothing, and cited the model numbers affected. I submitted the ticket at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was assigned ticket number 77B91. I watched it in the system. For 6 minutes, its status was new, then it changed to under review. 60 seconds later, it was gone, not closed, not resolved. It had vanished entirely from the queue, as if it had never existed. The logs I could access showed no record of its deletion. It was a digital ghost, exorcised by an administrative god. That was the moment the fight became personal. The system wasn't just compromised, it was an active participant in the cover-up. There was no internal path to the truth. I stood up from my desk and walked to the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of my office. The lights of Greybridge glittered below, a sprawling circuit board of 1,000,000 disconnected lives. I saw my reflection superimposed over the city, a faint, translucent figure in office attire, my Northwick Analytics ID badge a stark white rectangle over my heart. It was a leash, a symbol of my compliance. But as I stared at the woman in the glass, another reflection layered over it. The plan, a new plan. No more anonymity, no more trusting a system designed to protect itself. If the internal mechanisms of justice were broken, I would have to find an external one. The 9:00 a.m. press conference was meant to be Celine's coronation. Colton would anoint her as the public face of Northwick's integrity. They would stand on a custom-built stage in the Riverline Tower's main atrium, bathed in soft, flattering lights, and sell their beautiful lie to the world. They had written the script, designed the set, and chosen their star. They thought of me, if they thought of me at all, as a piece of the backstage machinery, a cog humming along reliably in the dark. They had made a critical error. They forgot that the person in the dark is the one with their hand on the main power switch. They had built the stage, but I was the one who was going to turn on the lights. The birthday dinner was a performance, but the real work began in the sterile silence of my apartment at 1 a.m. The city was a quiet grid of distant lights outside my window, but on my 3 monitors, the data streams were screaming. This was my true sanctuary, a place of pure, unadulterated fact, and for weeks, the facts had been telling me a story of a deep, systemic lie. It started as a nagging inconsistency, a persistent grit in the gears of the company's financial reporting. The official P&L statements, the ones meticulously prepared for the board, and the real-time risk dashboards my team monitored were diverging. The divergence was subtle, always happening in the dead of night, and always, without fail, within a 4-hour window before a major investor pitch. It was like watching a patient's vital signs being manually adjusted on their chart just before the doctor's rounds. The patient was still sick, but the chart looked healthier with every visit. I began by searching for the mechanism. In a system as complex as Northwick's, you don't look for a person, you look for a tool. I found it buried in the system's scheduler, a cron job set to execute at an unusually precise time, 02:17 a.m. The script was elegantly simple, deceptively named Cleanup Ledger, ESH. A cleanup script suggests maintenance, housekeeping, but when I examined the code, I saw its true purpose. It wasn't cleaning anything, it was bleaching. A few lines of Python that targeted a specific set of predictive models, isolating the loss window variable and applying a smoothing algorithm that shaved the peaks off the highest risk projections. It was a digital lie, automated and executed with inhuman consistency. The next step was to trace its origin. The execution logs showed the script was running from an IP address assigned to a workstation on the 25th floor. the CFO's floor. A quick cross-reference confirmed the machine belonged to Dana Varick. For a moment, it seemed straightforward. A CFO cooking the books, but it felt too obvious, too clumsy for someone as meticulous as Dana. The real tell was in the authentication protocol. The script wasn't being run by Dana's own secure credentials. It was being triggered via an SSH connection using a key generated by a temporary low-privilege account. Guest PR. Guest PR. The two letters at the end were a flare in the dark. PR. I pivoted from the server logs to the physical security logs, which my department had audit access to. I filtered for all access events on the 25th floor between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. on the nights the script ran. The pattern was immediate. On every single one of those nights, a single card was swiped for access at the main corridor door at precisely 2:05 a.m. The card belonged to Celine Ridley. The access note, required for after-hours entry, was always the same. Dropping off hard copies of PR materials for morning review. The timeline was a prosecutor's dream. At 2:05 a.m., Celine enters the CFO's floor. At 2:17 a.m., a script is executed from the CFO's machine using a temporary PR account. By 2:25 a.m., Celine's card is logged leaving the floor. She wasn't just dropping off documents. She was delivering the weapon and waiting for the shot to be fired. Now I had the what, the when, and the who. I needed the why, the explicit instruction that would tie it all together. I turned my search to the email archives on my mirror server, filtering for communications between Colton, Dana, and Celine's agency domain. It didn't take long. I found an entire thread dedicated to narrative alignment for the Blackwood Group pitch. Dana had sent a preliminary data sheet with a stark warning about market volatility. Colton's reply, sent from his phone at nearly midnight, was the key. "Donna," he wrote, "this is too raw. We need the clean ledger perspective. Celine, can you help us find the right language here? Remember, we're not lying, we're aligning." We're not lying, we're aligning. The phrase was pure Celine. It was the sanitized, corporate-speak philosophy she had been preaching for months. It was permission. It was policy. It was the verbal architecture for their entire fraud. Celine had replied to all, attaching a revised document. "Here's a version with more constructive framing," she wrote. "Focusing on the upside potential rather than the risk exposure, this aligns better with the ethical transparency narrative we've built." Attached was the lie, dressed up in a beautifully designed PDF. I now had the complete chain. The guest PR account was created on a request from Celine's agency for after-hours content integration. The SSH key was issued to a specific laptop within their network. Logins to that laptop required user authentication. The final approval on the aligned documents, complete with their doctored stability projections, was time-stamped and logged under one user, S. Ridley, my sister. She was the final link, the one who reviewed and approved the sanitized numbers before they were fed into the script. I felt a cold, hard certainty settle in my chest, but certainty wasn't enough. I needed proof that was mathematically and legally indestructible. I spent the next 3 hours in a state of intense, focused fury. I was no longer just an analyst. I was a forensic expert reconstructing a crime scene. I pulled every relevant log file from my mirror server. I ran checksums on every piece of evidence, the script, the emails, the server logs, the security footage logs, to create unique cryptographic hashes. This would prove that the files had not been altered since the moment they were captured. I compiled everything into a chronological narrative, a sequence of events backed by timestamps and digital signatures that could not be repudiated. It was a perfect, self-contained universe of their guilt. At 4:30 a.m., the package was complete. I encrypted it, then encrypted it again. I uploaded it to a secure, anonymous cloud vault. Then, I opened a new secure message. My hands were steady as I typed the email to Julian Croft, an attorney whose name was whispered with a kind of reverence among white-collar crime specialists. He was known for two things: his encyclopedic knowledge of the Dodd-Frank Act and his absolute ruthlessness in representing whistleblowers. I gave him a brief, clinical summary of the findings and included the link to the encrypted data vault, along with the decryption key. I hit send. I expected to wait hours, maybe even a day. The legal world does not move at the speed of data, but my phone buzzed exactly 19 minutes later. The reply from Croft was short and devoid of pleasantries. Ms. Ridley, I have reviewed the preliminary evidence package. The chain of custody you've established for the data is impeccable, if what you have is accurate, and I have no reason to believe it isn't. The SEC will be extremely interested in Northwick Analytics. Mr. Rusk, your CFO, and the PR firm in question, do not speak to anyone. My office will be in touch by 6 o'clock a.m. with representation documents. We are filing for official whistleblower protection immediately. A wave of something that felt like vertigo washed over me. It was done. The first domino had been pushed. But I wasn't finished. The law is slow. Public perception is fast. I needed a second front. I opened another secure browser tab and navigated to the website of the Ledger Line, Graybridge's most respected financial newspaper. I found the profile of their lead investigative journalist, Marcus Thorne, a man who had brought down 2 hedge funds with his reporting. I wrote him a simple, 2-line message from a burner account. I have verified non-public information regarding systemic data manipulation at Northwick Analytics in advance of their Series E funding round. Evidence is prepared. Are you interested? Then I set my terms. Meeting, 7:30 a.m., the Grindhouse Cafe, lower level of Riverline Tower. Condition: full story embargo until a formal federal investigation is confirmed. I shut my laptop. The sun was not yet up, but the first faint, gray light was beginning to stain the eastern sky. The fault line had been drawn. Now all I had to do was wait for the earthquake. The hours between 5 a.m. and the press conference were not a period of waiting. They were a sequence of tactical deployments. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Adrenaline was my fuel, and the cold. Clear logic of the plan was my map. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind the unnerving calm of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. At exactly 6 a.m., as promised, the secured digital documents arrived from Julian Croft's office. I read through the representation agreement, my eyes scanning the dense legal language with the same focus I applied to lines of code. It was a declaration of war, codified in clauses and subclauses. I signed it digitally using a 2-factor authentication key. The moment I hit submit, a process began that was far bigger than me. To ensure the absolute integrity of my evidence, each file I had collected was run through a hashing algorithm, producing a unique digital fingerprint. Croft's team then took these hashes and notarized them on their firm's private blockchain, creating an immutable, time-stamped record that proved my evidence existed in its current form before any official action was taken. It was a digital chain of custody, a shield against any future claims of tampering or fabrication. At 6:15 a.m., Croft confirmed receipt. His follow-up message was brief. Filing with SEC is underway. We have included the full chain of custody manifest and a formal petition for source protection under Statute 15 U.S.C. Sar 78U6. Await confirmation. Go dark. But I couldn't go completely dark. A successful coup requires an ally on the inside. Blowing up the company was easy. Ensuring the right people were left to pick up the pieces was the real challenge. I opened a separate, heavily encrypted communication channel, one I had established months ago under a false pretext, and sent a message to Marta Quill. Marta was the sole independent director on Northwick's board, a former federal prosecutor with a reputation for surgical skepticism and zero tolerance for corporate malfeasance. She was the one board member Colton couldn't charm or bully. My message was concise. Marta, urgent matter of material risk to the company. I have compiled a non-repudiable evidence package detailing systemic data manipulation at the executive level, directly impacting the Series E offering. Whistleblower complaint filed with SEC. I believe you are the only board member who can act on this information without prejudice. I can provide a summary. Her reply came in under 5 minutes. Send the summary, 15 pages max, Encrypt with my public key. I was already prepared. I had spent the last hour of the night distilling the mountain of evidence into a brutal, 14-page corporate autopsy. It wasn't an emotional plea. It was a risk assessment document, written in the language of the boardroom. The first slide was a timeline, a precise log of every data alteration, every after-hours access, every incriminating email. The next detailed the actors: CEO Colton Rusk, CFO Dana Varick, and external PR consultant Celine Ridley. Subsequent slides showed the actions: the cleanup ledger, script, the SSH key from the guest PR account, and Celine's emails aligning the data. The final section was a projection of the fallout: potential shareholder lawsuits, the certain collapse of the Series E funding, massive regulatory fines, and the terminal reputational damage. It was a balance sheet of their destruction. I encrypted the deck and sent it. Next, the physical evidence. I knew Colton and Dana would move to erase everything the moment they sensed a threat. I needed a snapshot of the crime scene before the cleanup crew arrived. I had already contracted a discreet, third-party IT forensics firm, renowned for their work in corporate litigation. A single-line email, sent from a burner account at 6:45 p.m., activated our agreement. Execute Contract 7B, 0800 sharp. At 8:00 a.m., a technician, operating under a prearranged and fully paid contract, would arrive at our third-party data center and, using administrative credentials I still possessed, create a complete, bit-for-bit disk image of the CFO's primary workstation and her virtual machine instances. The evidence would be secured off-site before the alarm was ever raised. With the legal, internal, and technical traps set, it was time for the personal touch. I opened my personal email and composed a new message. The recipients were my parents and Celine. The subject line: a surprise. The message was warm, effusive, and utterly false. So incredibly proud of Celine and her big day. As a late birthday gift, I've arranged for front row seats for you at the Clean Ledger announcement this morning at 9 o'clock. Can't wait to celebrate this amazing achievement together as a family. I attached 3 VIP guest passes, generated from my own executive-level account. I wanted them there. I wanted them to have a perfect view of the stage when the display case finally shattered. My phone buzzed with a message from a number I knew by heart. It was Colton. His tone was casual, a man reminding his subordinate of a simple task. "Ava, looking forward to your part this morning. Just a few technical remarks. Keep it simple. Don't say anything that isn't on the script Celine prepared. We need to stay on message." I looked at the message, a direct order to participate in the lie. I typed back a single word: copy. Then I activated silent mode, no more incoming communication. I finished my coffee and began to get ready. As I laid out my clothes, a severe dark gray suit, a stark white shirt, my eyes fell on the small velvet box for the silver pen I had given Celine. Last night, as she'd tossed it onto her pile of expensive gifts, I had discreetly retrieved it when she went to the restroom, replacing it with the identical, but inert, pen I had in my clutch. The pen currently in her Chanel bag was not just a writing instrument. It was a high-fidelity audio recorder with a micro SIM that live-streamed its encrypted audio feed to a secure cloud server I controlled. Right now, it was likely broadcasting the rustle of her purse, but soon, it would be a live microphone on the front line. In the pocket of my suit jacket, my fingers found a single, cold piece of metal. It was a key, not to my office or my apartment, but to a secondary server room on the 23rd floor, a dusty, forgotten space that housed redundant network switches. I had requisitioned it 2 weeks ago by filing a standard IT work order, requesting manual access for diagnostics on legacy HVAC sensor array. The request was approved without a second glance. It was a key obtained through the system itself, a legitimate tool for a subversive purpose. It was my emergency exit, my hidden passage. Every piece was on the board: the lawyer, the reporter, the board member, the forensics team. The evidence was notarized, the invitations sent, The microphone was active, and the escape route was secured. The fuse, long and invisible, had been laid through the pristine glass halls of Northwick Analytics, and it ended right at my feet. All that was left was the spark. The air in the executive green room backstage was thick with the scent of hairspray and nervous energy. At precisely 7:10 a.m., Celine cornered me by the makeup station. She was already in full battle armor, a crisp, ivory-white dress, camera-ready makeup, and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "There you are," she said, her voice a low, urgent hiss. "Did you read the script I sent you? The one for your section?" "I glanced at it," I replied, my voice neutral. The bugged pen in her purse was active, its microphone likely picking up the sharp clack of her heels on the polished concrete floor. I angled my body slightly, minimizing any obstruction. "Glanced at it?" she scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Ava, you need to memorize it, word for word. Colton will lose his mind if you go off script by even a syllable. This whole launch is about message discipline." She leaned closer, her perfume cloying. "You're the numbers person. Just say the numbers. Don't try to be smart. Don't try to explain anything. Just read the lines." I held her gaze. "The numbers are clean, then?" It was a simple question, but it was bait. She took it without a second thought. "Of course they are," she said, rolling her eyes with theatrical impatience. "Honestly, it's like you don't understand how this works. Last night, after you left, I had to stay up with Dana and fix some of the projections to make them prettier for the slide deck. The audience doesn't want complicated truths. Ava, they want a clean story." There it was, a direct, unequivocal confession, captured in high-fidelity audio and already streaming to a server an ocean away. I had to fix some of the numbers. It was more than I could have hoped for. I gave her a small, compliant nod. "I understand. I'll stick to the script." Her posture relaxed instantly. She had asserted her dominance and believed she had won. "Good," she said, patting my arm condescendingly. "Just for once, try not to make things difficult." She turned and swept out of the room, leaving me alone with her words echoing in the air. I checked my watch. 7:25 a.m. Time for my next appointment. I took the service elevator down to the lower concourse, to the Grindhouse Cafe. It was a sterile, overpriced coffee shop, mostly empty at this hour. Marcus Thorne was sitting in a back booth, exactly as I'd expected. He looked like a man who survived on caffeine and suspicion, with tired eyes that missed nothing. I approached without a greeting, slid into the opposite side of the booth, and placed a small, nondescript object on the table between us. It was a USB drive, but one housed in an epoxy resin block, making its internal components inaccessible. An air-gapped drive, designed for one-way data transfer and then destruction. "This contains a pre-briefing package," I said, keeping my voice low. "It includes a summary of the allegations, key names, and a selection of the primary evidence. It's everything you need to understand the story. My attorney's contact information is in a text file on the drive. You'll hear from him officially once the SEC confirms receipt of our filing. The embargo holds until then. No exceptions." He looked from the drive to my face, his expression unreadable. He didn't ask my name. He simply picked up the drive, his fingers closing around it. "If this is real," he said, his voice raspy, "you just lit a very big fire." "I'm counting on it," I replied. I stood up and walked away without looking back. I was back on the 24th floor, my own office, by 7:42 a.m., when my desk phone rang. It was security. "Ms. Ridley?" The voice on the other end was formal, laced with a procedural stiffness. "This is dispatch. We've just had an alert. Your ID was used to access the secondary server room on the 23rd floor 2 minutes ago. Can you confirm your location?" A jolt of ice water shot through my veins. My ID card was in my wallet, in my jacket pocket, hanging on the back of my door. I hadn't left the floor. They had cloned my card. It was an astonishingly bold, aggressive move. They weren't just preparing a defense. They were building a counter-narrative, A frame. They were going to paint me as a disgruntled employee, a rogue agent who accessed secure systems to steal or manipulate data. They were going to use my own role against me. "I'm in my office on 24, I said calmly. "That must be an error." "We'll send someone up," he said, and hung up. Before the security guard could even get to the elevator, Colton Rusk appeared in my doorway. He didn't knock. He filled the frame, his presence sucking the air out of the small space. His charismatic smile was gone, replaced by a look of cold, paternal disappointment. "Ava," he began, his voice a low, dangerous purr. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "We need to talk." He walked over to my window, looking down at the city. "You're a brilliant analyst, one of the best I've ever seen. But you're too ambitious. You've been digging into things that don't concern you." He turned to face me. "So here's what's going to happen. The board has just approved a discretionary performance bonus. Yours is $200,000. It will be in your account this afternoon, in an hour. You will go on that stage. You will read the script Celine wrote for you, and you will smile for the cameras, and then you will forget everything you think you found. You will be a team player. Are we clear?" It was the classic carrot and stick, a bribe, followed by an implicit threat. He thought this was a negotiation. He had no idea the war had already started. I glanced down at my smartwatch, my heart hammering against my ribs. The time was 8 a.m. on the dot. As if on cue, a single, discreet notification vibrated against my wrist. It was a secure message from the forensics firm. "Execution complete. Image acquired. Deverick W.S. Main. Hash. 7A8F. C3E1. Package secured off-site." They had it. The pristine, unaltered image of Dana's workstation was safe. Whatever they did now to cover their tracks on the live system, it was too late. I had their history frozen in time. I looked up at Colton, letting the silence stretch. Just then, my personal phone, sitting on the desk, lit up with a new message. It was from Celine. My blood ran cold when I saw the attachment. It was a still from a security camera. Time-stamped 7:40 a.m. It showed a woman with my build, my haircut, wearing a suit identical to mine, swiping a card and entering the server room on the 23rd floor. The angle was from behind, her face obscured, but the implication was clear. Beneath the image was a single line of text. "If anything goes wrong, I'll say it was you." It was their checkmate, the threat, the bribe, and the fabricated evidence to discredit and prosecute me if I refused. They had built a perfect trap. They had anticipated my moves and outmaneuvered me. A slow smile spread across my face. I picked up the phone and typed a one-word reply to my sister. "Great." Colton's brow furrowed in confusion at my reaction. He thought I was breaking. He had no idea what that word really meant. It was great that she had sent me that threat, that picture. It was a written confession of their intent to frame me, sent from her personal device, now saved and screenshotted. It was great that they were so confident in their clumsy little trap, so focused on me that they weren't looking at the real threat. It was great, because at 8:17 a.m., as Colton opened his mouth to deliver what was surely going to be his final ultimatum, my corporate email pinged. It was not a notification he would have expected. The sender was Julian Croft. The subject line was a string of case numbers, and the email was CC'd to the entire Northwick Analytics Board of Directors, including Marta Quill. The message was simple. "This serves as formal notification that a whistleblower submission has been received and officially acknowledged by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Division of Enforcement. Regarding Northwick Analytics, the SEC has initiated a formal inquiry. A request for a meeting with the full board will be forthcoming." I turned my monitor so Colton could read it. I watched the color drain from his face, the smug certainty replaced by a flicker of pure, animal panic. He looked from the email to me, his mind clearly racing, trying to comprehend how the game had changed so completely without him even realizing it was being played. Their meticulously constructed trap, the cloned ID, the bonus, the threats. It had all just snapped shut on thin air. At the exact same moment, the door to my own trap, a federal investigation, had just burst wood open. The atrium of the Riverline Tower had been transformed. At precisely 9 o'clock a.m., the lights dimmed, and a massive LED screen, stretching 3 stories high, flickered to life. It displayed the words, "Clean Ledger," in a serene, confident blue font. Beneath it, the tagline pulsed gently, "The Future of Trust." The space was packed with journalists, investors, and company employees, a curated audience ready to witness the birth of a new corporate narrative. The air hummed with anticipation, a low-frequency vibration of money and ambition. From a side entrance, Celine emerged onto the stage. She was a vision in ivory, bathed in a soft, flattering spotlight. She walked to the transparent lectern, her movements fluid and confident. She was born for this. She looked out at the crowd, her expression one of earnest sincerity, and began to speak. Her voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, was a warm, melodic current, washing over the audience. She spoke of a new era of corporate responsibility, of the courage to be transparent in an opaque world. She painted a picture of Northwick Analytics not as a company, but as a movement. "Truth," she said, her voice catching with perfectly modulated emotion, "is not just a metric, it is a mission." As she delivered the line, a single, crystalline tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She let it hang there, a glittering testament to her profound sincerity. It was a masterful performance. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Colton Rusk stepped onto the stage and embraced her, a tableau of the visionary leader and his ethical muse. He took the lectern, his own energy more forceful, more commanding. He spoke of data integrity as the bedrock of the financial world and positioned Northwick as its unassailable fortress. In the front row, I could see Dana Varick, our CFO, nodding at every key point, her expression one of stern, unwavering agreement, a metronome of complicity. My parents were beside her, their faces glowing with a pride so intense it was almost painful to watch. They were seeing their daughter, the star, reach her zenith. "But this vision isn't just about leadership," Colton boomed. "It's built on the work of our incredible technical teams, to speak to the integrity of our models. I'd like to invite to the stage the head of our model governance team, Ava Ridley." My name echoed through the atrium. A different spotlight found me as I walked from the wings toward the center of the stage. The heat from the lights was immediate, a physical pressure on my skin. I reached the lectern and adjusted the microphone, which let out a brief, sharp squeal of feedback, a discordant note in the otherwise perfect symphony. The teleprompter screen in front of me glowed with the script Celine had prepared. 3 paragraphs of bland, technical reassurances. I ignored it. I looked out at the sea of faces, journalists with their pens poised, investors with their calculating gazes, my parents with their beaming smiles. I took a breath. "Thank you, Colton," I said, my voice steady and clear. "We're here to talk about the truth." I paused, letting the word hang in the air. I saw Colton give a slight, almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. He thought I was playing my part. I smiled, a thin, sharp curve of my lips. "So let's start with the truth, as recorded in the server logs at 0217 this morning." A flicker of confusion crossed Colton's face. Before he could react, I pressed the small remote in my hand. Behind us, the massive LED screen went black for a single, dramatic second. Then it changed. The Clean Ledger logo was gone, replaced by a stark, white screen displaying a system access graph. A jagged line representing data traffic bumped along the bottom of the screen until it reached a specific point on the timeline, where a massive, angry red spike shot toward the ceiling, labeled in bold. Black letters above the spike were the words, "Unauthorized Script Execution, 0217 a.m." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The slide changed again. Now it showed the technical details of the SSH key used for the access, with the user account guest PR highlighted in yellow. The next slide was a grainy, black and white still from a security camera. It was time-stamped 0205H and showed Celine, her face clear as day, swiping her access card to enter the 25th floor corridor. The final slide in the sequence was a string of alphanumeric characters, a long, incomprehensible line of code. Beneath it, a simple label, Shay 256, hash, cleanup ledger. I glanced at my sister. Her smile was frozen on her face, a brittle, cracking facade. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the lectern. In the front row, my father's smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of stunned disbelief. I knew, with a cold certainty, that the tiny microphone in Celine's purse was at that moment broadcasting the frantic, shallow sound of her breathing to my cloud server. Colton took a step toward me, his face a thunderous mask of rage. He reached for the microphone. "Ava, you're clearly misunderstanding a routine maintenance procedure." His voice was cut off. I had pressed the remote again. This time, it wasn't a slide. It was an audio file. Celine's voice, my sister's voice, suddenly filled the entire atrium. It wasn't the warm, sincere tone of her speech. This was the sharp, impatient hiss I had heard in the green room, now amplified 1,000 times, echoing off the glass and steel. "It's like you don't understand how this works. Last night, after you left, I had to stay up with Dana and fix some of the numbers to make them prettier for the slide deck. The audience doesn't want complicated truths. Ava, they want a clean story." A dead, profound silence fell over the room. The only sound was my sister's recorded voice, confessing to fraud in front of the entire financial press. Every camera, every phone, was now pointed not at the stage, but at Celine, whose face had crumpled into a mask of pure horror. And in that moment of absolute silence, the main doors at the back of the atrium opened. 3 figures stepped inside. Marta Quill, her face grim and determined, flanked by a man and a woman in dark, conservative suits that screamed federal agency. They didn't rush. They walked with a calm, deliberate authority that instantly commanded the attention of the entire room. They were not here to watch a press conference. They were here to start an investigation. All eyes were on them. Colton froze, his hand hovering uselessly over the microphone. He looked from me, to the SEC agents, to the screen displaying the evidence of his crime, his empire crumbling in real time. I leaned into the microphone one last time. My voice was quiet, but in the stunned silence, it carried to every corner of the vast room. "A clean ledger," I said, "begins when you stop bleaching the ledger." I placed the microphone down on the lectern. The soft thud it made was the only sound. It was the sound of a final, decisive end. The chaos of the atrium dissolved into the sterile, refrigerated silence of the 25th floor boardroom. It was a glass-walled operating theater, and the patient, the soul of Northwick Analytics, was laid bare on the polished mahogany table. The emergency board meeting had been convened with a speed that spoke of pure panic. On one side sat Colton and a visibly trembling Dana Varick. Celine was there too, huddled in a chair slightly behind them, no longer a star but a ghost at the feast. On the other side were the board members, their faces a mixture of shock and fury, with Marta Quill at their head, her expression as unreadable as granite. The 2 SEC agents sat at the far end of the table, silent observers, their presence a suffocating weight in the room. A small, unobtrusive video camera on a tripod was pointed at the proceedings. "First," Colton began, his voice strained, attempting to reclaim a shred of authority, "we need to handle this internally. Turn that camera off." One of the SEC agents, a woman with steel-gray hair, spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, yet it cut through the tension like a scalpel. "This meeting is now part of a federal inquiry. The camera will remain on. The recording is now official record. Please proceed. Ms. Quill." The first blow had been struck and parried. Control had been established. Marta turned her gaze to Dana. Ms. Varick, a script designed to alter risk data was run from your workstation. Would you care to explain that? Dana straightened, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. This was her move, the classic deflection. It must have been a technical error, or perhaps a rogue data engineer exploiting a vulnerability. Our systems are complex. I am a CFO, not a coder. I would never authorize such an action. This was my cue. I spoke without looking at her, addressing Marta directly. That's not what the forensic image of her workstation shows. The script wasn't an anomaly. It was a scheduled cron job. The independent forensics firm confirmed it was executed from Ms. Varick's unique hardware ID. More importantly, the SSH key used to authorize the script was generated from a temporary account, Guest PR, which was created via a request from the PR agency's external IP address. The bleach was applied with a key provided by the marketing department. Every head turned toward Celine. She shrank under their collective gaze. Looking small and fragile, she found her voice, a thin, reedy whisper. I just handled the language, the messaging. I don't understand the technical side. I was just trying to make the company's story clear and positive. Did your linguistic framing include approving the final's adjusted numbers? I asked, my voice cold and even. No, never, she insisted, her voice rising with panic. That's a lie, I stated flatly. After the script was run, the after reports were forwarded to your agency email address for final review. Your reply, which was captured on my server and is now in the possession of the SEC, was sent at 2:48 SAM. It reads, and I quote, "Looks great, much cleaner narrative. Ready for the deck. You weren't just suggesting words. Celine, you were signing off on the lie." A low murmur went around the table. The structure of their conspiracy was being laid bare, brick by incriminating brick. Marta turned her attention to me. Her expression was clinical, a necessary test of the foundation of this case. Ms. Ridley, the integrity of your evidence is paramount. Can you confirm its chain of custody is unbroken? This was the pillar upon which everything rested. Every piece of evidence, every log file, email, and audio recording was cryptographically hashed the moment it was collected by my mirror server. I explained, my voice resonating with the absolute certainty of fact. Those hashes, the digital fingerprints of the data, were then notarized on a private blockchain by my legal counsel, creating an immutable, time-stamped record proving they existed in their current state before this meeting ever began. I have the full, notarized chain of custody report ready for this board and for the SEC. The evidence is pristine. Colton, who had been silent, seething, saw his opening. He slammed his hand on the table. A sudden, violent crack in the room's composure. This is absurd. This entire proceeding is based on evidence gathered by an employee who has been engaged in illegal activity herself. This isn't a whistleblower. This is a saboteur. He nodded to the head of security, who was standing by the door. Show them. The security chief stepped forward and placed a tablet on the table, displaying the security photo of the woman in a suit like mine entering the server room on the 23rd floor. We have proof that Ms. Ridley used a cloned ID to access a secure server room at 7:40 this morning, no doubt to plant this so-called evidence. I move for the immediate suspension and investigation of Ava Ridley for corporate espionage. It was his final, desperate gambit, the trap he thought I had walked into. That's an interesting photograph, I said calmly. However, the building's access control server, which I'm sure the SEC will be subpoenaing, will show that my official, registered ID badge was used to enter my office on the 24th floor at 7:35 a.m. and did not leave that floor until I was called to the green room at 8:50 a.m. It is physically impossible for me to have been on the 23rd floor at 7:40. I paused, then reached into my briefcase and pulled out a sealed, transparent evidence bag. I placed it on the table. Inside was another ID card, identical to mine. The person who cloned my card was sloppy, I said. looking directly at Dana. In their rush, they created 2 copies. This one was recovered from a locker in the auxiliary security office on the ground floor. My forensics contact was kind enough to dust it for prints before handing it over to my legal counsel. There's a beautiful, perfect set of fingerprints on its surface. They are a confirmed match for CFO Dana Varick. The heir left the room. Dana looked as if she had been turned to stone. Colton stared at the evidence bag. His last line of defense not just broken, but turned into a weapon against him. He was finished. Marta Quill leaned forward, her voice low and final. Mr. Rusk, you have 2 options. You can tender your resignation and that of your CFO, effective immediately, or you can remain seated and receive a federal subpoena at this desk from these agents. The choice is yours. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy as lead. It was the sound of a dynasty ending. In that silence, I heard a choked sob. It was Celine. She turned her tear-streaked face to me, her eyes filled with a venomous, wounded betrayal. You're killing me, she whispered. You're killing your own sister. I met her gaze without flinching. The years of forced smiles and swallowed resentments were gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. You were sent the final numbers. Celine, you wrote back. Looks great. You signed the approval. You put the knife in your own hand. Marta broke the standoff. We need a vote, she said, her voice cutting through the personal drama. All in favor of suspending CEO Colton Rusk and CFO Dana Varick indefinitely, pending the results of a full, independent investigation and offering the company's complete cooperation to the relevant authorities? Every hand went up, except for Colton's. He was already a ghost. After the vote, as the agents quietly began speaking with Colton and Dana, Marta approached me. The board is unanimous. We want you to step in as interim CEO, Ava, to lead the cleanup. It was the ultimate prize. The throne my parents had always believed was Celine's, now offered to me, the ultimate validation, and I felt nothing but the desire to see this through to its true conclusion. Thank you, Marta, I said, and for the first time, my voice was not that of an analyst or a whistleblower, but of myself. But I don't need the throne. I just needed to cut the power to the liars. I stepped out of the boardroom into the hushed, carpeted hallway of the executive floor. The air outside the room felt thin, breathable. I had just refused a throne, and the freedom of that decision was a clean, sharp feeling, like the first lungful of winter air. But the illusion of escape lasted only a moment. They were waiting for me, my family. They weren't standing together. They were a scattered, broken formation. My father stood stiffly by the window, his back to me, looking down at the city as if he could will it to swallow this entire building. My mother was a few feet away, her arms wrapped around Celine, who was weeping silently, her perfect makeup now a ruin of black streaks against her pale skin. My father turned as he heard my footsteps. His face was a mask of cold fury I had not seen since I was a child and had accidentally broken a crystal vase. It was the face of a man whose prized possession had been irrevocably damaged. "What have you done?" he said, his voice low and guttural. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "You have disgraced this family. You have dragged our name through the mud for everyone to see." I didn't answer him. Instead, I pointed to a large screen on the wall, usually displaying stock tickers and market news. It was now filled with the Northwick Analytics logo, a breaking news banner flashing beneath it. A financial reporter was speaking urgently into the camera. His words were muted by the thick glass of the boardroom, but the message was clear. The world was watching. "A family is not a backdrop for a press conference, Dad," I said, my voice devoid of the tremor I had expected to feel. "It's supposed to be the truth. You just forgot what that was." My mother let go of Celine and rushed toward me, her face a crumpled mess of desperation. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my suit jacket. "Ava, please," she whispered, her voice conspiratorial, as if we were still allies in some shared secret. "You have to fix this. Celine, She was only trying to help the company. She was trying to protect everyone's jobs. Her words were so perfectly aligned with the family narrative, so willfully ignorant of the facts, that I almost laughed. She was still trying to polish the display case while the artifacts inside were being seized as evidence. Protect jobs by erasing financial losses from the record. Mom? I asked, my voice cutting through her delusion. Is that what helping is? It's not a bad story you fix with better words. It's a crime. Her hand dropped from my arm as if she had been burned. The simple, ugly truth was a language she refused to understand. Celine looked up then, her eyes red-rimmed and full of a raw, pleading agony. This was not the polished star from the stage. This was the raw, terrified core she had hidden her entire life. I thought it would be okay, she cried, the words tumbling out between sobs. Colton, he said it was just standard practice. He said every company does it to look strong for investors. I didn't know. I didn't think. Her voice trailed off. She didn't know because she never asked. She didn't think because she was paid not to. She was the face, not the brain, the role my parents had assigned her from birth. I walked over to her and reached into my clutch. I pulled out the sleek, sterling silver pen. Her pen, the one I had given her for my birthday, the one that had served as my silent, perfect witness. I held it out to her. She flinched, staring at it as if it were a snake. Happy birthday, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of finality. It's a gift. It recorded every word you said in the green room, every word you said in the car on the way over. It's all saved. The implication hung in the air between us. The confession she had made to me in private was now a permanent, indestructible record. My father saw the pen, saw the look on Celine's face, and something in him snapped. The cold fury turned hot. He lunged toward me, his hand reaching for my clutch, for the phone inside, for the source of his ruin. You give that to me, he snarled. Before his fingers could touch me, a uniformed security guard, the same one from the boardroom, stepped between us. He didn't touch my father, but his presence was a solid, impassable wall. Sir, he said, his voice calm but firm. Please step back. My father froze, his hand still outstretched, his face contorted in a mask of impotent rage. He was a man used to absolute authority in his own world, and he had just run into a boundary he could not cross. It's all right, I said to the guard, my voice steady. I'm fine. The guard nodded but did not move. He was my new reality, a world with rules that even my father could not bend. In the midst of this shattered family tableau, my phone vibrated in my hand. I glanced down at the screen. A new email had arrived. The sender was the SEC. The subject, Whistleblower Protection Program. The first line read, Dear Ms. Ridley, this email serves as confirmation of your provisional acceptance into the program, effective immediately. A shield had just descended around me, invisible but absolute. A second notification popped up, this one a secure message from Marta Quill. Ava, the board is moving forward with the independent investigation. Regardless of your decision about the interim role, they have unanimously approved my proposal. I want you to lead the data restructuring program. You will have full autonomy, an unlimited budget, and you will report directly to me and the independent board committee. This is your chance to build a real clean ledger from the ground up. Let me know. I looked up from the phone. I looked at the three people in the hallway. My father, defeated and simmering with a rage that had nowhere to go. My mother, looking back and forth between her daughters, her face a canvas of confusion, unable to process a world where her star had fallen and her backstage brain was now in control. And Celine, who was staring at the pen in my hand, the symbol of her undoing, finally understanding that her words, for the first time in her life, had inescapable consequences. In my mind, the official family portrait from their mantelpiece, the one with my shoulder cropped out, suddenly fractured. It wasn't a single crack. The entire image splintered, the glass shattering into 1,000 sharp, glittering pieces. I saw it fall, the shards cascading onto the floor, and I felt a profound sense of release. No one was going to sweep them up. No one was going to try to glue the picture back together. The display case was finally, irrevocably broken. I turned away from them. I turned my back on their shock, their grief, their rage. The elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open with a soft, inviting chime. I walked toward it, my footsteps the only sound. This wasn't an act of abandonment. It wasn't me leaving them. It was me leaving the role they had written for me. The quiet daughter, the supportive sister, the reliable, invisible mechanism that made their perfect world run. That character had delivered her final line. I stepped into the empty elevator. I didn't look back. The doors slid shut, sealing me in a quiet, silver box, and began to descend. The elevator did not stop. It descended 25 floors in a single, smooth, silent motion, a hermetically sealed capsule carrying me from the war room to the world below. When the doors opened into the main atrium, the scene was one of controlled chaos. The stage was empty. Journalists were clustered in tight, murmuring groups, speaking urgently into their phones. Employees were scattered, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. The air, which only an hour ago had been electric with manufactured optimism, was now thick with the metallic tang of a corporate catastrophe. No one noticed me. I was just another woman in a suit, slipping through the wreckage I had created. My phone chimed with a soft, clinical notification. It was 11:26 a. A news alert from the ledger line. The headline was stark. Northwick Analytics CEO. CFO suspended amid SEC inquiry. Whistleblower alleges systemic data manipulation. I tapped the link. The official press release from the board was already quoted in the first paragraph. It was a masterpiece of crisis management, full of phrases like leadership transition, full and transparent cooperation with regulatory authorities, and a renewed commitment to foundational data integrity. It was a bloodless statement announcing a brutal execution. The old regime was officially dead. A text message appeared on my screen from a number I now recognized. It was Marcus Thorne, the reporter. His article was already live. His message was simple. They're calling you the Riverline Ghost. Do you have a closing line for the piece? A final comment? I stood for a moment amidst the debris of the company's reputation. Applause had been the currency of my family. The air my sister breathed. They had chased it, manufactured it, and lied for it. I had chosen a different metric. I typed my reply, my thumb steady. Truth keeps better time than applause. I sent it and slipped the phone into my pocket. I walked toward the main entrance, a set of enormous revolving doors that separated the filtered, climate-controlled air of the tower from the raw atmosphere of the city. As I stepped into a glass partition, the door began to move, pushing me out onto the granite plaza. The wind coming off the Gray Bridge River was cold and sharp, a sudden, bracing shock that felt like a baptism. It smelled of water and exhaust and freedom. I looked up. The sky was a vast, unbroken sheet of pale autumn blue, a blank slate waiting for a new equation to be written upon it. My phone began to vibrate in my pocket, a frantic, insistent buzzing. I didn't need to look. I knew the frantic rhythm of their panic. I pulled it out. The screen showed 3 missed calls in quick succession. Father, mother, Celine. As I watched, my father's name appeared again, an incoming call. They were trying to pull me back into the narrative, back into the wreckage of the display case. My thumb moved to the side of the phone and pressed the switch. The screen went dark. The buzzing stopped. Silence. I looked back at the Riverline Tower one last time. High above, on the massive LED screen that had been the stage for my sister's coronation, the last vestiges of their lie were being erased. The bright blue words, clean ledger, flickered, dimmed, and then vanished into blackness. And as the symbol of their fraud died, a slow, genuine smile touched my lips for the first time that day. It wasn't a smile of joy or triumph. It was a smile of equilibrium, of a debt finally paid in full. I reached into my clutch and took out the small, simple box I had bought for myself the week before. My own birthday present. I opened it. There was no jewelry, no expensive perfume. Inside, nestled on a bed of black foam, was a single, stark white plastic card. It had no name, no photo, just a magnetic strip, a chip, and 3 words printed in a clean, sans serif font. Data room. Audit. This was not a key to a corner office. It was a key to the truth, the raw, unfiltered, unaligned truth. There would be no tearful reunions. There would be no dramatic scenes of forgiveness or reconciliation in a sun-drenched cafe. The damage was too deep, the fracture too fundamental. You cannot rebuild a house on a foundation of lies. All you can do is condemn the structure and build a new one somewhere else, surrounded by a high, impenetrable security fence to protect the integrity of what is real. I took out my phone again, ignoring the notifications of missed calls. I sent a single, secure message to Marta Quill. 2 words. Starting today. I put the phone away. The revolving door pushed me out onto the street, the motion propelling me forward. My heels clicked against the pavement. A sharp, rhythmic sound. In the distance, the old city clock tower began to strike the half-hour. Its deep, resonant bells counting the seconds with an ancient, unwavering precision. My steps fell into perfect sync with the steady, solemn chime. A new clock had started. My clock. Thank you for listening to this story. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts on Ava's journey. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to our channel and liking the video. And if you want to help more people discover this story, hit that hype button. Your support means the world.